Okay, so we've looked at some basic equations, some 1-2-step equations, and the last time we looked at this, we were looking at this very last step. This order of operation is in reverse, and that's how you solve an equation. But I want to look at some equations that are a little more in-depth, some multi-step equations right here. All right, now this list over here to the left is a list you can follow to solve any equation, no matter how many steps, and you may not need every step in that list, but it's a good guide. It's something you should have with you when you're trying to solve equations. I just need to make sure that I check and see, are any of these steps here? You know, you may be able to just skip straight to number 4, order of operation in reverse, but if I see anything along the way that I can do, I need to watch out for that. So let's look at an example real quick of something that would have most of the things in this list here. And the first thing I want to look for when solving an equation is, can I distribute something? So look for something outside of parentheses, and in this case there's a 4 that I can distribute, so I can follow this first step. This equation includes something that needs to be distributed, and that would be the first thing that I'm going to look for before I start solving this equation. So I can distribute the 4 to both of those terms, and that's going to give me 12n minus 16. And I'll bring everything else in the equation down. I still have this plus 1 over here, and I still have 2n minus 35 over here. Okay, so all I've done is distribute. Now I'm going to see, can I combine any like terms in this equation? Is there anything in this equation on either side of the equal sign that can be added? So here, 12n, there's nothing else in that I can add on this side. But there is a negative 16 and a positive 1. These are both just whole numbers. I can add those together. So I would go ahead and combine those like terms. Now there are no like terms on this side, so there's nothing to do. But over here I have a negative 16 plus 1, and that's going to give me negative 15. And I'll just bring everything else down. And now I will check for my variable to see if the variable is on one side. So this is going to be the next thing I look for. Is the variable on one side? Well, I have a 2n over here and a 12n over here. The variable is not on one side. Now, before we've just looked at equations where the variable was on one side, but here I have an n on both sides of the equation, and I'm solving, so I want to get that variable to one side. Now, you can go either way. I can subtract the 2n and get it to the other side, or the 12n. Try to keep your variable positive if you can help it. So what I'm going to do is I would subtract 2n from both sides to get my variable to one side of the equation. I want my equation to say n equals something. So I subtract 2n from both sides. And I'll go ahead and bring everything else down. So now I have negative 35 equals 10n minus 15. Alright, so now this equation looks just like the equations we've dealt with before, where I can go down to my final step, and I'm just going to do order of operation in reverse. Now this equation, it does have a lot of steps. Well, it has four real steps that I have to look for, but it's, as long as I follow the list, everything should work out, and I should get to a point like I am right here, where this is just a basic two-step equation, and I'm just going to follow the order of operation in reverse. Remember, it's always subtract or add first. So I have this 10n minus 15. I need to get rid of the subtract 15 first, so I would add 15 to both sides of this equation. Here I've got different signs, so I'm just going to subtract. 35 and 15 gives me 20. And I'm going to keep the sign of the larger number, negative 20, equals 10n. And my final step, divide or multiply, if that's ever an option. I got divide or multiply here, so divide, that's 10 times n, so I would just divide by 10. And my final answer is going to be n equals negative 20 divided by 10 is negative 2. So I had to, and I apologize, that was a lot of steps in this process, but I wanted to give you an example that has everything. And maybe I can zoom out on this a little bit so we can actually see the whole thing. But I had to follow that list of steps up there in the left. Now, You might do a problem where you don't have to distribute, but you do have to combine like terms. Or you may have to, you may have one that just goes straight to that last step. But always use this as your checklist. Use this as a guide when you're solving equations. If you stick to the list of steps, you really can't go wrong with solving equations. And that's pretty much everything in one example on solving equations. So look for these steps. If they're not there, just go to the next step.